For those of you to meet Liesl and her family and learn all about their trek to Tibet and to the Kingdom of Mustang. And we're going to see a film about that, and Liesl is going to talk about what that experience was like. But before we do that, I would first like to thank the Friends of the Hamilton-Wenham Library for providing this program and making it possible for us. They're always very generous and help us do the wonderful programs that we do here at the library. And I just have a couple of quick announcements. One is we are starting a writers group. We have a number of budding writers in our midst, and they're going to have their first meeting Tuesday, January 26th from 9 to 11 a.m. in the local history room. And yes, 9 a.m., and that is before the library opens. But we will be here to let people in, and it will be a really good group. If you're interested, there are flyers on the side table over there. Also, we've been doing this whole series about skin cancer and melanoma and the prevention and treatment. And we have Dr. Sarima Durakovic, who's a dermatologist from the North Shore Physicians Group of Danvers. She will be coming Thursday, January 28th at 7 p.m. No registration necessary, but she's really wonderful. They're going to do a PowerPoint presentation, and if you're interested, please do come. Then I want to introduce our community read, which is going to take place or span the months from January to April. And it is called A Treasure of Books for Two Towns. And our selection for 2010 is Everything I Need to Know I Learned from a Children's Book by Anita Silvey. So if you saw in the foyer all the children's books, and I know many of them are probably familiar to you, her book talks about there are politicians and celebrities and authors and people from all walks of life and how children's books impacted their lives. And Anita Silvey is going to speak on April 8th at Gordon College all about that. But in the meantime, we'll be having all these other events. We have there'll be a panel of speakers and educators about the importance of early literacy for children. That will be on March 10th. And then our kickoff event is Saturday, January 23rd, for everybody from 1:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. You can come dressed as your favorite children's book character, and we will have prizes that will be awarded for the most innovative costumes. And this is for everybody. And if you want to see what I am going to be, you have to come and find out, because I'm not telling. So, without further ado, I know you did not come here to hear me speak all night. You came to hear Liesl and to meet her family. And Liesl, why don't you come up and introduce your family and introduce the film that we're about to see. Thank you.
Now, yes, member of our family. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is such a pleasure to see so many people here, and mainly because it's always a thrill to come home to your hometown where you spent the important young years. I went to Cutler School, starting from third grade in Winthrop. This was Bessie Bucher at the time when I came here, and then of course the Hamilton-Wenham Regional High School, and I recognize some faces from those days. One tends to, when you're making a film, produce in a bit of a vacuum. You write a treatment for a film idea or have a dream, an idea that, this is my experience, that I would pitch to PBS and National Geographic or Nova, and sometimes they're quick to pick up on the idea and say yes, 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 and sometimes they're not. And yet you know that you have a story that is compelling, that is going to tell us more about a region in the world that needs to be uncovered, about human history, and that stretches back 6,000-7,000 years. So here we were sitting on some discoveries that we made in 2007, having gone and just filmed on our own because no one thought that they wanted to fund us and take a chance on us in 2007 to go on this journey. So we took our own camera and got a volunteer cameraman who we just happened to run into when we were in Nepal a few weeks before. And miraculously, he said, "I'll come," and he paid my expenses. And he had his own camera, a high definition HDV, high definition video camera, which is 3-chip broadcast quality. And then we had our little 3-chip, not so great DV camera, and some audio equipment, and our kids in tow, and this dream to go and a permit that took about 13 years in all, but for us 3 years to get with the Department of Archaeology in Nepal to gain access to never before explored caves in a region called Upper Mustang in Nepal. So we just went ahead and on our own dime and took a chance and started our research. And the film is what you're going to see. This film was not supposed to be made. We actually came back with this footage, and we showed a little bit. We put a trailer together. We showed a 5-minute trailer at a film festival, and there were some folks at National Geographic who saw it, and they went back and said, "Why didn't we fund this?" And talked to their executives. And to make a long story short, we did get funding to go back. They didn't want this story. They wanted us to go back and continue the research, but to develop the story further. So they wanted a completely different, very slick film, well shot in high definition in full HD, which is a very heavy camera package, and it involves a lot more money. And so we were more than happy to go back and do this. So that meant year 2. And that was the film that was to be made. But we went ahead with just a little bit of extra funding and cut this film in 4 weeks, and just it's the little film that could, and just went ahead and made our own story. It's we call it the renegade, the backstory, the kind of homegrown duct tape productions, family, almost home video, some of it family production. And you'll see Finn here, who is 6. He's in the film. Our son Finn, and Cleo, who's now 4. Finn is 6 now, but he at the time was 3, and she was 18 months on our first trip into Upper Mustang. And they are the youngest expedition members to have ever gone on an expedition in Nepal, let alone perhaps the Himalayas. And then, of course, my cousin is Pete Appas, who is the star of the film, of course, and the shining star of my life, of course. So without further ado, I'd love for you to have a look. And we'll, Julie, do I need to?
Price for the fan, it is part of the HVAC. It cannot be turned off. If you have a difficult time hearing, you need to not be a backseat pew sitter, as they say. You need to come forward so that you can hear better. And I apologize about that, but there's nothing we can really about it.
Similar to the caves along the Yangtze, where they have the healing, but they have the hanging caskets.
Yes, the Dunhuang caves.
And the caskets, they don't know how they ever placed that by up, have no room to them, and they're still hanging.
Right. Yeah.
Like those.
Right. There hasn't been any correlation, any research done on the correlation between the Dunhuang caves and these, because, I mean, let's face it, we basically have returned from there with a team of scientists. We went back with an American archaeologist, Dr. Mark Aldendorfer, and he's just grappling with all of the data. But
It's really hard to hear you.
okay, sorry, we should scream a little more. And were you able to find the
You went.
He's probably in the children's room. Do you want me to get it?
I think so.
Just let me say if you want to see the secrets.
Yeah, there's my sister Heidi.
If you want to see the other film, the library has it, so you can borrow it.
I was hoping this was a sleepover. Coffee in the morning, getting talk bones and RBS.
So amazing, such a joy to see this. Okay,
Thank you.
I really appreciate your going out there, bringing it back to everybody who's interested or even potentially interested.
Well, thank you. It's been a long haul. Pretty much we're still funding ourselves and going over and just doing it because we believe in it. Our permit lasts 2 more years with the Department of Archaeology, and so we feel an urgency there. As we say in this film, there are thousands of caves, and on this first trip we were only able to inventory 10. So we went back and have been back 3 times, and we're now up to 60. But it's a daunting mission.
Not one of the part was launched, and every one of them has. Not every one of them has the archive. Some of them are constantly
Right.
empty.
Many are empty, but we still inventory them. We go in and we photograph them as best we can. We map them and document anything that is remarkable about them.
And are you
Luckily, there are
taking-
very few that have artifacts that are removable, because that would be a problem, because we couldn't remove them. And if it became known or understood that there's any statuary or anything that's removable, then that could really be problematic.
Well, I was wondering if any of the villages might be setting up a museum or a repository for any of the materials.
Right. Gillian's asking if any of the villages are setting up a museum. That's really our aim, is to turn our inventory, which is now just in digital form, a compilation of all of our notes. We have for each cave that we go into, we have a cave inventory sheet that we all fill out, and then of course we photograph, we use video, we use whatever we can. And my thought is that we could turn that into a digital virtual cave or a series of caves that anyone could explore, really as a means to deter people from going into the caves themselves. We really don't want anyone to not only risk their lives, but to try to do any exploration of the caves. The thought is to have this virtual cave museum sit in Lomatam, one of the villages, the main village that trekkers go to, and have that benefit the community in some way. There are also conservation efforts to, that's a big part of our fundraising, is to conserve what we are finding, in particular the snow leopard cave that you saw where the pug marks are inside the cave. That cave has some cracks on the ceiling. It is threatened with collapse. So we keep going back and measuring and remeasuring, and we're not sure if anything can be done. We're working on hiring a geoengineer to go in and do some sort of assessment of whether we can actually construct something to save the cave from collapsing in on itself. I know you had a question.
Can you talk about the split culture and the relationship between the King of the Seven Mustang and all hands that's on Earth? What is history of Earth?
Yes. You want to tackle that?
The history and trajectory of Tibetan Buddhist culture. In a sentence, do I get 2 sentences?
So the connection between Raja
The Raja.
and the rest of Tibet.
Oh, the Raja. The Raja he is ultimately of the Shakya lineage, which is one of the four lineages: the Shakya, the Kagyu, the Geluk, and the Nyingma. The Shakya is a reformed sect, which is very unlike the Nyingma, which is the oldest sect, which emanates from the Buddha who was born, the historical Buddha 2,500 years ago. There's always been a bit of push-pull between the Geluk and the Shakya, as there's been power emanating from Western Tibet and as far away as Central Tibet and Lhasa, which is primarily Geluk and of the same sect as His Holiness Dalai Lama. The Raja has his own power that's granted to him by the kings of Tibet, but he has his own special lineage, the Shakya lineage, which is much smaller by comparison to the Gelug. The Nyingma tradition is flourishing in all of Bhutan, and Guru Rinpoche, who was discussed in this film, and I think with more fulmination in the first film, The Secrets of Shangri-La, is one of the great saints who actually brought the teachings of the Buddha, the Nyingma tradition, into Mustang, and then continued throughout all of Asia, and one of his last places was actually in Bhutan.
And they found a connection through the art that we recently found in a cave close to the Tibetan border that looks a lot like the some of the art found in the monasteries of Alchi in Ladakh, and they've and so after doing some research with an anthropologist who specializes in Upper Mustang, a very little known fact, but the kings of Mustang were quite connected to Ladakh, western Tibet, and they believe also the far reaches of eastern Tibet, basically China. So our conclusions are that this valley, the Kali Gandaki River Valley, was a very important migratory route for not only human migration, but for art and ideas and culture in general. It's one of the few ways to pass through the impossible Himalaya and make your way down to the Indian subcontinent. So it's been an overlooked vein or artery between Tibet and India because it was closed off to the modern world until 1990. So.
And there was some difficult views from people to get how did the old to conscious forever.
Repeat the question.
So,
The question was if it was so difficult for all of us to climb up there with experience as mountaineers and rock climbers, how did the original inhabitants and people who created the caves get in there? Well, it's very likely that the facades of the cave were quite different when they were first created through geological wasting, erosion, constant percolation of water down through the matrix of the rock. There's been so much erosion, so much the area has really changed. Also, just along the valley floor of the river, you can imagine what the sediment is like, which is very friable and easily moved by water, that when the caves were created, some of which were upwards of 3,000 years ago, the level of the ground would have been quite different from what it is now. So caves that were done at ground level at that time would obviously be upwards of 100, 200 feet in the air. But we believe that the caves themselves also had architectural features much like our Anasazi and Pueblo cultures in southwestern United States, where they had a series of scaffolding, they had intricate handholds, carved footholds that have been used over time. And they also had, just like we saw in Mustang, central shafts going up through the different levels of the cave that one could put one's back against one side, one's foot against the other and push. And also there were just different handholds and footholds then carved into that matrix as well. So it's almost like a 3D climbing puzzle as you're going up this cylindrical corridor, going up and connecting each of the individual levels. But it's a great question, and one we don't feel like we have the best answer to, because between the changing and the impermanence of the landscape, and then obviously not really finding a lot of evidence respective to any type of scaffolding or architecture other than really one cave, we really don't know.
Where's Upper Mustang? Is that kind of?
Yes, it's about 60 miles from, the question is where is Lamantang, the sort of royal city of Mustang, and it's 60 miles from the nearest airport, as you can call it an airport, an airstrip. And you trek a good 60 miles to get in there. Or is it 30 miles?
About 30 miles.
Back, 60 round trip.
So people have recently been allowed to push that.
Yes, since
Yeah.
It was
1990.
open previously to foreigners sometime, right?
It's closed in the 70s.
Yeah.
It was Peter in the ice, but
Right.
go to big so.
Peter Matheson went in,
Yeah.
in 1991 or 1990, literally the year in and out that then he and Tom Laird went in and read their not so factual book. It's beautiful, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. He's a great writer.
I thought that was what this old like that for the 70s or something.
No, there is a book from the 70s, and that's Michel Paizel, who's a French explorer. So he was able to get special permission from the ministries in Nepal to go in as an anthropologist and do some research, as was Professor Tucci and one other explorer long time ago. Yes.
One of your genetic license to activity is they cut those were in the cakes, and I think you mentioned 7 is bounced in this all.
Right.
So, have you increased that enough?
Since that time, no.
We know of
But
5.
we know of 5 because there were 3 that were known, and then we uncovered, actually, there were 2 that were known, and we uncovered 3. It's a little bit of fuzzy at times because it's hard to explain how would you say they were known. One was not known by the general public, but we only found one person who could, well, 2 of them that could tell us. So actually, each one, it's pretty much that. You find one herder, shepherd, who happened to at some point see a cave, and they point us in the general direction, and then it all comes together. So we have some leads on many leads. Too many on some. There's one legend that says there are 108 Kabuims going from one village all the way towards Tibet. So that's an auspicious number, and that would be a challenge.
But
Yes.
Have you been able to do any archaeological studies in the current Tibet? What is Tibet?
Well, we haven't. We certainly haven't even tried. That obviously Mustang was a part of ancient Tibet. The only reason we're able to do the research we are is because it's in Nepal, so it's on the other side of the border. Our main archaeologist, Dr. Mark Aldendorfer, he's pretty much the premier archaeologist who has American archaeologist doing work in Tibet, and he spent the last 20 years pretty much every summer going to Tibet and trying to answer questions about human migration across the highest plateau in the world, and where did the first peoples come from? Did they come from Persia and the sort of western part of the world, or did they come up through China? The Chinese are now saying that it was the earliest people were Han, or Chinese, and that's the latest paper that's come out. But we will comment on that. Yes.
Actually, two questions. What all she maybe they describe as so clear.
I think so.
And also, in just in the restoration of the art, what you think that's good due to do whether it's an awareness of the first humans used during those process of their what's going to do.
Okay, I'll answer your second question. The second question is about the pigments and in the restoration of the art. So there has been no restoration done on any of the caves, but we do understand that the caves you notice the sort of very dusty reds and blacks and white. That's all from Mustang. Those are all pigments that you can find, according to Luigi Fieni, that you can find in the mountains of Mustang, and that's a practice that is still continued today. There are monasteries. Everything is washed down with the pigments from the mountains. In the monasteries themselves, they do pigment analysis, and they have found that the monasteries, the highest art in the monasteries, are painted with malachite, azurite, gold, cinnabar. I mean, all of the top dollar, beautiful, beautiful ancient pigments. So through special analyses, they've been able to determine that. And then, of course, if they're going to add, well, you'll have to see a film I produced for Nova in 2002. It came out, and I think it's here at the library, so you can check it out. And it tells you in detail about how the paintings are restored in the great monasteries of Lomantang. And it's a fascinating film just because it gets into the minutiae and the questions. There's a controversy about whether the restorers should finish the paintings as the locals believe they should. But of course, the European restorers feel that they could never match what the original master artists were able to do, and they would prefer to do cross-hatching and a minimal intervention, but where you could still stand back from a distance and receive the blessing of the divinity and still see it as a completed figure.
Tell them the name of the film.
Oh, the film is called
Lost Treasures.
Problem that is called Lost Treasures of Tibet because it is in Nepal and it's political. But the first part of the question was, what are the sacred? What is it like to step into the sacred spaces? And Pete is very eloquent about this. So, tell me about that.
I don't know if I'm eloquent, but I'll take a stab at it because I know it personally. It just had the ability to take one to a completely different place. It had the ability to transform my mindset. It had the ability to almost to be like stepping into a time capsule and be able to, to sit down in front of one of these paintings and to leave the arid, high mountain, incredibly dry aridity of the Tibetan plateau and of Mustang behind, and to look into some of those tropical paintings and to look at those teachers that certainly in the one cave who looked like they had come from the Indian subcontinent, come from obviously a long ways away, and one could only imagine the privations that what they would have suffered to have lived in that place and to have created that high art. And what was their motivation? Why did they go such a great distance and live and endure those privations for such a long time? And I felt like I was living part of their compassion, and I could feel that they were almost like leaving a message for anyone who would go and who would sit before the paintings with an open mind, who would consider their travail to be able to bring that great piece of art forward. And it was just for me a great and transformative moment, just thinking about this great lesson of impermanence, that certainly everything that's in front of us in a place like Mustang, respective to the landscape, is constantly in a state of destruction. But there's this great renewal of the human spirit and this great transcendence. And I think this feeling that through the love and compassion of that painter, that love actually modulates, mollifies the passage of time, memorializes time, and then ultimately the art, I think truly is what endures.
Done.
Yes,
Discuss.
my dad, Peter Clark. He's been asking questions from the first moment we said the word Mustang. He's like, what?
The horse,
All right.
the ranch, the car.
You've got 1,000 caves and you've been in 60, and you're looking for some clues. And yet, this is a culture with a great written tradition. And you're finding manuscripts. There's monks that record everything, and great books that come out of the Chortens. Is there no history that tells you anything about where the Chortens can be and what the purpose of them are? I mean, I find it a conflict in what we see as a written tradition, and yet you have to find a herder that knows about something.
Well, I'll take one quick stab, and that's that first of all, we have to remember that in Tibet, 10,000 monasteries, I guess the figure is, were destroyed by the Chinese Cultural Revolution. We've lost that history. So not all of it, but that's why Mustang is so important. Then Mustang has only recently been opened, and you can't really go into the Chortens and break them open just for the sake of science and see what's in there, because there could be important sacred texts in them. Dr. Charles Ramble, who joined us from the Oriental Institute in Oxford, England, has broken into many Chortens with the permission of the locals, but certainly not all of them, and literally just maybe reaching in a little bit just to see with all the village elders there. And he has procured some interesting texts, but all I can say is it is such a mystical place. Every time you go, you find it's an incredible experience to think that we're not the experts. What are we doing stumbling on all of this? I mean, he's the expert when it comes to getting up into the impossible, really dangerous places. But as far as, and I can document anything, but trying to translate it and explain what it's all about and making it relevant to the world is what the other specialists that we've brought in are able to do. And even these specialists say this is a very difficult place to work. Even the locals, they leave for the winter. It's hard to just get permission every time you go. There are major blow-ups, and you'll see in the second film, if you watch it, it happens again, yet again, another altercation, but we all come out of it renewed in a sense. And it's just, I can't explain it, but every stone the cave that you see in this film where they first go in and you see the stacked rocks and the lattice work, we went back in a year later just because we wanted to take the Nepali archaeologists, or our American archaeologist in, and also just a conceit for the film. We just wanted to see, well, what's he going to see that's different from all of us? And all of a sudden, one of Pete's climbing partners starts pulling up some of the stones that were just random stones lying down, and then looking deeper inside the granaries. And he finds really important papers that are handwritten, and they're the tax papers. It's a real written history that is not religious, but is more about the nearby villages and the dates that they were abandoned and why they were abandoned, and all of this information that's so important, primary historical documents. So totally overlooked the first year. So you can go in there with the best of intentions, but you would need to spend 10 years in that one cave to try to really understand. So I don't know if that answers your question, but maybe Pete can tackle it somewhat.
No, it's difficult to go back in the annals of the information that does actually exist. There are a series of 4 major books. They would be like 4 books of the Old Testament that are called mullahs, and that's what we take from the king's records and from the Kempo, who is really the highest cleric of the land at Lomontong. And they have to divine from that lyrical document the myth and the fact, and they have to divine that, and they have to tease all of that out. There isn't anything like a treasure map that tells us where to find 108 or 12 or 16 or 9 or 7 goblins. They're not really mapped in any specific way. There may be an allusion to them. There may be an indication that they exist. But we don't know whether that's factual. We don't know whether that's part of a great myth. And that's something where we have to bring in the anthropologists, and we have to bring in the people who have lived with that culture for a long period of time, people like Charles Rample and others who really know these stories in and out, and who have divined the truth from the fiction. And many of the books that we found in the one cave in Marjong are largely, at least half of them, are Bon. Some of them are copies of those original 4 books, and some of them are completely original documents and completely original books. They're like finding chapters of the Old Testament. We don't really know what they are. Jeff Watt, who is our art historian from the Rubin Museum of Art in New York, said that some of them are in a language known as Zhangzhong, which is an ancient language and indicative of, if you believe the stories, part of an ancient empire that existed across all of the western plateau of Tibet, Mongolia, and extending very close to Beijing. So it's difficult to look at a library that's 8,000 folios and know exactly where that's going to what it's going to tell us. But right now, that's exactly what the scholars who understand, who know Bon culture, are doing, and they're trying to integrate, and they're trying to translate all of those documents and try to figure it out and do a bit of triangulation across the documents that we already have and the books that we already have. But it's going to be someone's life work, translating all of those folios and trying to interpolate those stories against what we already know. I'm not sure it's going to be mine.
It seems to me that this is such important work that you're doing, and so, what I would say, cutting edge in this field, that I'm surprised that you don't have people wanting to fund your exploration. Is this really a challenge for you to find people to support this? It really is.
I think in this day and age, there's such great competition, but I think that there are definitely funds available for doing this type of research, but I think that there's been some difficult times in the past, most recently, respective to going out and doing, I'm just going to say, adventurous field work where we can't really verify what we're going to find. We don't know definitively. I mean, for every cave where we found something, we probably went into 20 others where we didn't find a thing. So it's really difficult to convince people to support you when really you're going off into the unknown. You have a fairly good word of someone who's traveled through that area that there might be something in X cave, or perhaps there's artwork in that cave. But going to the National Science Foundation and asking for $750,000 on the word of a horseman out in the middle of Tibet, that's another story. But fortunately, we have 3 years of track record behind us now, and some significant findings and some exciting findings as well. So, obviously we're hoping that this will snowball and we'll be able to bootstrap this up quite a bit as well. And we'll try to engender further support from Nepal's Department of Archaeology and try and bring in some of their young archaeologists who are interested in high mountain archaeology, because this is really the advent of that exploration and that science. And they've been spending most of their time excavating Lumbini and the birthplace of the Buddha. There really hasn't been nearly the type of excavation in the northern Nepali border as there has been in the southern. So it's really all opening up, and I'm very excited for the people of Nepal. I think they're just going to learn such remarkable things about the people who traveled through that remarkable and dramatic country.
Do you have a hunch as to this sort of migration of people? Is it a group of people that came from India and went that way? I mean, listen to what the Buddha was doing. There was this migratory north. Is that there's also Chinese side of things, or the northern side of things? Do you have any hunch for what you discovered, or heard, or stories told?
Well, we have better than a hunch based on the some of the DNA evidence that we have, and now we're returning, and our proposal with the NSF is to do strontium testing, which I'm really excited about because it has to do with the enamel in your teeth that embedded in your beneath the enamel would be information that will tell you about the origins of your birth, basically your birthplace, where you were born, the region. And it has to do with the water you drank when you were a baby, and its connection to the geology, the local geology. We have found through the DNA of the 4 individuals that we found in 2008 in the caves that are from the 14th-ish century that they were not from Mustang. So they're foreigners. Okay, and then the conclusions of Dr. Aldendorfer are that they are not coming up from the south, which has been the predominant thinking. Certainly the Nepali archaeologists believe this, as do the Germans. However, the Germans found that their individuals that they found, the 28 bodies, were of Mongoloid, that's the only term they use, origin. So, but they didn't, their DNA testing was inconclusive, but this was through doing, analyzing the shape of their heads, the cranium, anthropometric, thank you. He's so much more eloquent, that's why he's always on camera and I'm behind the camera. It's a little bit of a debate in that our German scientist who's going to join us on this next trip, which we hope to get funding to do a film as well, believes very strongly that these peoples came from India, and the American team and British team believe they were from probably Western Tibet, more towards Ladakh. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Yeah. Interesting for us. We get into the minutia, but the studies that will be done will include the strontium testing, which I think is very exciting. It'll be the first time, if we get this funding, that a team will do this kind of testing relevant to a broad question about human migration, dating as far back as basically 20,000 years ago is what Dr. Altendorfer was able to find in Mustang. No human remains, but evidence of tombs and tent circles and pit houses. So, of course, then he showed what evidence of tool making, and I mean, I'd look at these stones and just think, well, yeah, I'm impressed with what he can see. It didn't translate well on film, so we weren't able to do that part of the story. But those people it doesn't really relate to this question about the people who were from the Germans found people who were as old as from 1000 BC. So that was the earliest date. And then from some chaff that we took from the snow leopard cave with the 55 panels, we found that that chaff dates back to 4000 BC. So we're talking BC. That means that humans, it's in the plaster that the humans used to actually make the facade for this cave. So it's very exciting, and that is one piece of evidence, but luckily we have two others. The Germans also got a date quite similar to that in another cave, as did one other German scientist that was an independent who has a similar date. So it's not a random thing. So that's actually been put into our proposal to the NSF. So we think that's quite exciting.
I'm just curious about one thing which I haven't heard yet. What happened in 1990 to open up Liesl?
Yeah.
Maybe other people know, but I just...
Yeah. Okay. You want to explain?
I think that there was just a bit of a backlash respective to the amount of time that they actually kept it a restricted zone. I'll try to condense it, but ultimately in the mid to late 1960s there was an insurrectionist movement that was launched by people of eastern Tibet from the region called Kham, and a number of their warriors, and probably the fiercest warriors that would have ever come out of Tibet, are the Khampas, and they essentially had camps all throughout the kingdom of Mustang in the late 60s and early 70s. The Khampas were trained by the US CIA in Saipan and also in Fort Hale in Colorado. There were literally hundreds of camps in this area, and it really was effectively a place where the Khampa warriors would lead insurrection trips against the Chinese and try to target bases, military installations, any road building activity, things of that nature. So the place was very, very unstable. If one were to read Michel Peisel's travels of going in there in the 1960s, people were very wary and gave a very wide berth to the Khampa warriors because they were very unpredictable and very fierce, and many of them standing 6.5 feet tall. Very wild, very nomadic people. And they also, ultimately many of the Loba people believed that they were in some ways responsible for the plundering of some of the ancient monasteries in Lomantong and in other areas. But in any case, the region was just completely unstable, and finally, through the efforts of the Nepalese government, in collusion with the Chinese, the Khampa armies were dispersed, and the leader of that movement killed. So this would have taken place roughly about the time that Nixon first went to China in the 70s and ultimately had his dialogues with Mao. Ultimately, the CIA, working with the Khampas, completely dissolved at that point. So there was no longer an American intervention in Mustang to support the Khampas and to do airdrops and to further train those armies to resist the Chinese. So what ends up happening at this point is Nepal effectively has this restricted zone where they were still trying to deal with soldiers and renegade groups that were traveling through this area. And this went on for effectively another 15 years, 16 years. Then finally, because the area seemed placid, the Nepalese police had several bases established, and ultimately Nepal is a country that has a revenue stream chiefly out of tourism. So they wanted to open up some of these regions. They also realized the cultural importance of a place like Mustang and the economic viability of the whole Kali Gandaki Valley. So now it's open, and ultimately one can and probably will be able to go continuously from the Tibetan border all the way down to the village of Beni at the southern end of the Kali Gandaki via road. And that is being filled with the the efforts of both the Nepalese and the Chinese.
And those under that particular group of warriors, I mean, that's all.
I'm not sure exactly, but there's some pretty fierce guys out in eastern Tibet. Many of them are, maybe a lot of it might be hair.
Did the Raja maintain his ascendancy during that time, or did he flee?
He did. He stayed. I mean, I think that politically the people of Mustang were in support of the Khampas. Unfortunately, many of the Khampas were not as perhaps noble-minded as many of the others. So unfortunately, ultimately there was just a lot of division amongst the Khampas. Some were definitely a bit of adventurists in their own personal gain, which happens with a lot of troops like that, from my understanding. Yes.
The snowbikers can just go like bounty hounds and hurting the Kiras Law. It seems that these caves have multiple uses. What's your best guess for the use of that particular in the sites?
Yeah.
It's a great question. That site and really all of Mustang is only a shadow of what it formerly was. There's a huge collapsed fortress at the top of the hill before you would rise from the snow leopard cave, getting up to the top of the hill. It very likely was either a small city or perhaps a large monastic community might have lived in that place, as there are many smaller cells that are there. That cave is also known as the Cave of the 84 Mahasiddhas. That cave, what exists now, is only really one half of it. So there's still, the other 42 sides of it just fell off. So this would have been an extensive and huge complex at one time. But why it was there, just given its lack of proximity to water. Obviously, none of the land there was really arable. People would have had to support that community that was there. Why was it there? Ultimately, there may have been, a series of signal towers by which people could communicate up and down the valley from that high place. They would have had access to perhaps a vision of other signal towers throughout this region. But this was a high, desolate, lonely place. I mean, a remarkably an inspiring place, but remote. So it definitely was
And I will say that
jump
just to jump on it to say, and you should take it back, but that because that's the point, because it's so remote, that's why they put it there, is our thinking. I mean, when you're going up there, you can't imagine that a group of people would have decided to stay there overnight or for longer than just a few hours, because you really want to get back to Dodge. You want to get back to where if you can call them, creature comforts are. So and so the thinking is that it's the journey. You know the quote, right? it's the journey to that location and the struggle and the difficulty in actually getting to these places and living in these places that is the teaching. That's a big part of the teaching. And then once you actually get there, imagine there's some very important teacher that resides in this retreat, this perhaps monastic complex. I just imagine some wonderful community led by a monk or lama sitting in this cave, and they're waiting for you. And you've come from anywhere, and you've taken 3 months to get there. And just like today, Mustang there are parts of Mustang that are still very important pilgrimage sites. So you'll see sadhus who are Hindu and Buddhist pilgrims who are barefoot going up to these very, very remote places. And so we think it's the same practice as the sadhus do today, that people would have undergone this journey. We found evidence of very old chortens dotting a route. This was a yellow brick road, and the chortens would just gleam in the distance, and that would lead you, this path to the west, to this important site called Konjaling. There's another one that we uncovered that's called Riedseling, with beautiful paintings. And then there's a third called Gandenling, and the lings are considered there's sort of the points up on the compass, but also another translation is that they're islands in the sky. So that started to make sense to me because they are all islands and retreats in the sky, and somehow if you made that journey just to get up there to Mustang, then there would be these destinations, and you'd receive your teachings, and you'd go through a transformation you do on the journey, but you would do it the same when you stay there, and then you can return back to your regularly scheduled programming.
How do you know that there was hours? I mean, how do you know back then one it's a lush place with lots of water, especially if you have paintings, colors, plaster.
Right.
I mean, they had to mix it somehow, right?
Well, as far as the preparation of the mud to finish the surfaces, absolutely they had water available to them. How it was transported there, who really knows? There's definitely been significant geological events. Some geologists have suggested that the Kaligandaki River actually at one time flowed north. How far back this actually took place, difficult to say. In some of the images of the ancient monasteries that are there in Lomontan, built in the 14th century, there are these pillars in the huge meeting halls, some of which are about a meter in diameter, and some of them appear to be cut from a single tree. So where did that come from? How did they get there? Some of them definitely were carried in sections. How far down the valley did they come from? How far up did they go? How did they get up there? We don't have the answer to that question. But as far as taking it back into antiquity, we don't know when this major geological event would have taken place, but obviously this is a place that has significant geothermal activity and definitely moves around quite a bit and is subject to erosion and wind and all of that. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It looks probably quite a bit different now than it would have. Like
Yeah.
something like that.
I mean, you add water to this environment, and the villages are actually, they're oases. They're absolutely stunning against that backdrop of dust and rock. So our feeling when we then started to find these caves filled with beautiful paintings was, I mean, this was the Florence of Tibet. Artists came here because it is quite livable in the valleys, and the artists would come here. I think part of the fun, if you could call it that, would be to go and live in a cave and that's high and impossible to reach, but that would maybe inform you and help you with your depiction of the deities or whatever it is that you're painting. So, I mean, that's sort of us filling in the blanks, but Dr. Charles Ramble will say, no, we shouldn't think of it as arid and dry. Look at all, I mean, when you go there during harvest time, there's plenty of food, plenty being harvested, and obviously the communities were sustained. Communities had to move when the water would change, when the streams would change. So we know that, and we know there was an event. It's pretty similar to the in date to the Little Ice Age, I believe, in Europe, but it was the monsoon, the Indian monsoon, a major change in the monsoon in terms of amount of rain that happened in the 16, 17, I don't have the date, but we know through core samples that there was a big change, and then that affected communities in a big way. They had to literally move from where they were, and they changed sort of the whole mapping and trajectory of many of the big enclaves in Mustang, and possibly even the course of the Kaligandaki. These are the sorts of things that some of the scientists are saying. Okay, thank you so much for hanging out.